Hello, YouTube. A book was written in Dutch in the 17th century. The author's name was Nicolas Witson, and the title of the book in English is North and East Tartary. There were 3 editions. The book discussed the geography, ethnography, flora, fauna, and linguistics of remote areas of Inner Eurasia. These were known as Tartary or Tartaria, the land of the Tartars, nomadic people about whom Western European scholars knew very little at that time. This sizable book was intended as an explanation to accompany the large and very detailed map of Tartary that Witson had published 5 years previously. He described the Crimea, the Caucasus, the lower and middle Volga regions, Volga River, the Ural Mountains, Siberia, Mongolia, Central Asia, Afghanistan, Tibet, Manchuria, the islands and shores of northern Japan, the Amur basin, and Korea. Nicolas Witson, who lived between the years 1641 and 1717, was a Dutch statesman who was mayor of Amsterdam 13 times between 1682 and 1706. In 1693, he became administrator of the Dutch East India Company. In 1689, he was extraordinary ambassador to the English court and became fellow of the Royal Society. In his free time, he was cartographer, maritime writer, and an authority on shipbuilding. His books on the subject are important sources on Dutch shipbuilding in the 17th century. Furthermore, he was an expert on Russian affairs. He was the first to describe Siberia, the Far East, and Central Asia in his study North and East Tartary. Witson had traveled to Moscow in the years 1664-1665, but he never visited any of the countries he put on his map or described in his book. The prominent statesman drew on a large number and wide variety of sources for his writings. He carefully studied classical, medieval, and contemporary authors and also collected an enormous number of manuscripts and oral reports. And as a rich man, a very rich man, he could afford to pay large sums for valuable information, which he did. Witson was not only driven by scientific curiosity, but also interested in the practical aspects of relationship between empire building and economics. He described Russian and Siberian expansion and relations, as well as those of various groups of inner Eurasian merchants and their trade and itineraries. Witson was aware of the tentative character of his research, and he did not allow his book about the Tartary to be sold in Dutch bookshops, although he presented copies of his book to friends and important acquaintances. Prior to the recent re-evaluation, he had never been properly honored for his pioneering studies except in Russia. There, copies of his book and map, which was dedicated to Emperor Peter the Great, were available in the library of the Academy of Sciences. And Witson has always had an excellent reputation. In the 19th century, Russian historians and ethnographers discovered that Witson had used many Russian sources that had since been lost, and they praised Noord and Oost Tartary, the name of the book in Dutch, if I pronounce it right, as the most remarkable book about Asiatic Russia ever written by a foreigner. During the Soviet period, Witson was seen as a scholar who had opened up a new era in the study of Siberia. Nowadays, he is respectfully mentioned on many local Russian websites as the first to have reported on their town, province, nationality, or language. And in 2010, the joint Russian-Dutch Witson project produced the 3-volume Russian edition of Nord and Ust Tartary, published in Amsterdam. But let me add this. After 20 years of research and study, Witson published the first map of Siberia in 1690. This map represented the world from Novaya Zemlya to as far away as China. If you look at my videos about paranormal phenomena in Eurasia, you will chance upon many of the territories too. Witson had discussed with the Tsar, Russian king, the trade routes to Persia via the Caspian Sea and to China via Siberia. In 1692, he published that book about Tartary. Witson consulted classical authors and Arabic medieval writers as well as his learned contemporaries in Europe. The second enlarged edition, quite a bulky book, also written in the 17th century Dutch, presents a rather complicated mixture of various texts with encyclopedic details. It appeared in 1705 and was reprinted in 1785. In this book, Witson gave an account of all the information available to the Europeans at that time about the northern and eastern parts of Europe and Asia, and of course about the Volga River area, Crimea, Caucasus, Central Asia, Mongolia, Tibet, China, Korea, and the neighboring parts of Japan. In the text, for instance, we find lists of 900 Georgian and 700 Kalmyk words, and illustrations of the writing systems of Tibetan, Manchu, and Mongolian languages. Witson provides word lists and other data on more than 25 languages. In 1692, Witson received the diary of Maarten Gerrit Vries, who had explored the coast of Sakhalin in 1643, and it was never seen again. Witson died in Amsterdam. Russian Emperor and Tsar Peter the Great was present when Witson died and said that he lost a great friend. After Witson's death, his notes were considered lost for a long time. His nephew Nicolas Witson, the third, I guess, inherited his library, but was only moderately interested. 2,300 books were auctioned in 1728 and 1747, most in Latin, Dutch, and French. But Nicolas Witson III, or the younger, 1709 to 1780 was when he lived, inherited the manuscripts collected by several family members and sold at auction in 1761. Well, in 1886, it became known that copies of Nicolas Witson's diaries and notes were kept in a Paris library. 300 years later, his travelogue to Moscow could be published. And the book, like I said about the Tartary, is available in Dutch and Russian. I want to read you the excerpts of the book that were published on the Russian websites. I believe you will find them fascinating and they make you think. And of course, they pertain not only to Eurasia. Here it goes. Reliable witnesses who have lived in Siberia and near Astrakhan for several years say, although I would not dare to confirm this with an oath, since I myself did not see that behind the city of Azov, or somewhat deeper in Tartary, there is an area where petrified people in various poses are visible in the steppe. Steppe is like savanna, plains, as if alive. One eyewitness counted 18 of them, and with his own hands collected a pile of stones and put one of the petrified men on them, like a rider on a horse. I also mention here that on the map of Tartary, published by Ortelius in 1562, you can read about these petrified people. In addition, one Persian writer clearly indicates where these fossilized bodies were seen, at the place where he struck the lake, which he called China, at the beginning of the Ob River. There are, he says, stones in the form of people, camels, cattle, and other objects, as if a whole grazing horde with cattle had petrified, surprisingly and incomprehensibly changed, quickly and instantly, without changing their posture. These miracles, he says, took place 300 years before him. That is, around 1200, meaning the year 1200. The consul general in Tripoli, in Barbaria, informed me in letters that the area called Ogela lies 7 days away from Derna, which is halfway between Tripoli and Alexandria, has completely petrified. So the whole area was petrified. So people, animals, trees, and grasses, all this can still be seen in a petrified form. Other people who have lived in Algeria for a long time have told me the same thing. When camels have to tread on such stone ground with their soft feet, they are put on leather shoes with nails so that their feet do not get hurt on the stone grass. Such a petrified man was brought from there to Venice, and you can see him there. 2 other letters from Tripoli in Barbary, which follow below, from the consul of that state and another person, confirm that this is true. So the first letter: Dear highly respected sovereign and sir, the French consul going from here to Benghazi to buy horses, meanwhile sent his vice consul to the Ogela region, which was turned into stone, which seemed incredible to us, but now there is no longer any doubt, since he brought from there large pieces of date palm and olive tree. Weighing over 200 pounds, they looked as if they had been cut less than a year ago. Among these rarities is a piece of fig tree in which milk, or legebe, is still clearly visible. Around this place, there are trees everywhere on the road, all made of stone. Pieces of them had to be beaten off with hammers. Houses and people are very densely covered with sand. It was only with great expense and difficulty that they could be reached. I have several pieces of them that I would like to send to your highly esteemed, etc. With this, I remain your highly esteemed sovereign's humble servant, N. Tripoli, June 20, 1691. Dear Sir, the French consul who went to Benghazi to buy horses for his king sent his vice consul to Ogela 7 days' journey east, inland. This area has been turned into stone, which seems incredible to us. He bought back large pieces of date and olive trees weighing up to 2 quintals. They look so natural that you can easily recognize the veins and color as if it were a living tree. Now there is no more doubt. He gave me a large piece of fig tree and 2 pieces of olive tree. I'm saving them for you, to whom I respectfully kiss your hand, etc. Tripoli, Barbaria, to his gracious sovereign on June 16, 1691, from your servant N., who is very much obliged to you. Next, the region of New Ogela, which borders on Old Ogela, is obliged to pay tribute to the administration of Tripoli. It is fertile and populated, the size of a few days' journey. Petrified trees in an abandoned garden lie in whole alleys, all in the same direction, as if felled by a strong wind. They are hidden by a layer of sand. Sometimes, however, they open when the sand is blown away by the wind. There are no animals there except very nasty snakes. There are petrified fig trees on which fruits and milk are still visible, as if alive. The wood, fruits, and the trees have completely retained their natural color. The area of the old petrified and new Ogela is flat, lying about 7 days from the sea. The aforementioned former state consul in Tripoli told me about this in more detail when he arrived here, after checking with eyewitnesses. He also informed me that in the desert, inland, behind Tripoli, fossilized objects such as various fruits are often found. He saw petrified bread, still very similar to the real one, on which the blackness from the oven could still be clearly seen from below. They sent me some rather large pieces of wood, branches, and roots, which turned into stone in the petrified region in ancient Ogela. The largest piece is a part of a date tree, which has preserved the external and internal appearance of the tree so well that the difference is only the weight of the living tree and this petrified one. Other pieces are the roots of a date or olive tree, which are also similar to the still growing roots, both in color and appearance, in everything except weight. There are many round holes in the date tree, like wormholes. It is somewhat nostrous and whitish, not very heavy. The olive tree is a brown-green in color, strong, heavy, and dense, like the petrified branches. And to give a more reliable proof of this phenomenon, the roots of these two trees were sent to me from neighboring countries, which are similar in everything to petrified pieces, if they are not weighed. I also keep the bark of the tree, also petrified, on which all the signs of real bark are visible. Olive stone is so hard that it can be used to make fire. One of the petrified roots, part of which I keep, was so big and heavy that the camel could hardly carry it. They also added a fossilized human bone, which was also found there. It is as hard as a stone while maintaining the color and appearance of the bone. The fact that the fossilization of this area of the Ogela is a fact was also confirmed to me by a young man named Robert Theunis, who was taken into slavery in Tunisia and was a valet to Ali Bey, the exiled king, in the interior of the country, very far to the south, in the mentioned area. He studied the area more closely than any European. He wandered around this petrified land. He saw pieces of petrified wood brought from this area and kept by me, and told me how one of his comrades, named Cornelius, originally from Vlieland, also a slave, went to Mecca with his master at one time and drove through this petrified region, and he told him how he saw that the trees, fruits, and everything there had been turned to stone. Bartolinus tells how in the vicinity of Tripoli, in a short time, one city turned into stone, from where a petrified child was brought to France, and where he said he saw a petrified tree. The said gentleman undoubtedly meant by the name petrified city this area of Ogela. In 1691, on October 19, the following was written from Paris regarding the fossilization in the new lakes. In Africa, they found a city completely turned into stone. Men and women were brought to the king from there, and they intend to bring some more from there to decorate the gardens of Versailles. The late highly learned Hendrik Franken, who served as the pastor of the Reformed Church in Smyrna for many years, informed me that the petrified Ogela region was very famous there, and that he had seen a lot of bones, trees, dates, melons, lemons, and other fruits and petrified objects brought from there through Tunisia and the island of Cyprus. There is an area near Famagusta where many bones of people and animals are found near one rock, fused together and turned into stone. As eyewitnesses tell me, a petrified brain was also found among these bones. On the same island, at a place called Nicosia, a small hill is visible consisting entirely of fossilized oysters and their shells, also turned into stone and preserved to this day all the external signs of oysters and shells. I am informed as reliable that in Chile, on a high mountain or between mountains, 3 Spanish soldiers were found lying on their sides, who had been there for a long time, that is, outwardly petrified, but when the stone layer was removed from them, they also found meat and blood there. Who knows if this happened from the flight of a cloud carrying stone dust, or maybe from the long-term rest of the bodies lying in contact so closely that they turned to stone? Perhaps the soft parts have decayed and the largest and coarsest parts have hardened into one body from long contact and turned into stone while maintaining their former appearance. We read in Mr. Thevenote's books that similar fossils have been found in Mongolia, in the vicinity of the aforementioned Ogeli, towards the sea. There are remains of almost the entire ancient city, covered with earth, which was apparently decorated with marble houses and buildings, as there are many heavy processed pieces of white marble at a depth of 1 or 1.5 feet, covered with earth soil, and many large pillars and carved stones. It is believed that it was the city of Leptis. So this is what I wanted to let you know today. You can find my other videos about the mystery of the stones, or events that could turn people into stone, make living beings petrified. But I think this is a very interesting account, and I'm sure there is much more of interest in Nicolas Witson books. Just think of an event that could cause it. I'm sure with the advent of archaeology, we'll find out more. So that's what I wanted to let you know today, and stay tuned for more of my videos and my research in similar subjects. And if you can help my research, you can do so through the links you'll find in the description to this video. Please tell others about my work. Please like my videos. Thank you.